Hello, my name is Tristan Gurney and I've put together today this short video to talk about the importance and value of being versatile in the music profession in the 21st century. It seems to me now more than ever so critical that as musicians we're open to lots of different types of music making. So for example within chamber music, to exploring sort of working in small groups, to working in chamber orchestras, to working playing first violin, to playing second violin, to leading groups, to directing groups, to managing groups, perhaps even curating programs. And I thought actually based on my own personal experiences I could chat about a few of those roles and what I've gleaned from each of them. I have a fairly broad chamber music career really at the moment, and I've done all sorts of things from playing tutti violin in a chamber orchestra, to playing principal second in chamber and symphony orchestras, to leading those orchestras too. I've been in a string quartet. I've led a string quartet for 9 years. I direct large chamber ensembles, doing kind of reductions of big symphonies like Mahler symphonies and Sibelius symphonies for small groups of players. And I also curate chamber music and curate the programmes for Royal Northern Symphonia up at Sage Gateshead. So I do kind of a variety of different things, and through that time I've kind of gleaned a fair bit about each of those roles, and I've found it incredibly rewarding too, to explore all these different avenues, and have learned so much from doing them. So I'm going to share some of those thoughts with you, and hopefully encourage and urge you to look far and wide for your inspiration in what you would like to do through your careers. So I'd like to start off with the role of tutti musician, or tutti violinist in my case, in both chamber and symphony orchestras. I'm going to focus on chamber orchestras because that's how I started off, and it's of what I know. So I'll talk about the playing side of things in a minute briefly, but I just wanted to focus in on the fact that there's so much more than just playing in the orchestra, I think, that's important here in terms of being versatile. I know that orchestras and managements of orchestras are so keen to hear from within the orchestra of ideas, of talents that lie within, whether that be from a playing perspective and passion for chamber music and offering to provide pre or post spotlight type event concerts, or perhaps from speaking and doing some program notes or pre-program talks, or perhaps there's a sort of passion to get into the community and play pieces that are connected to those orchestral concerts in care homes or in small churches, in coffee concerts, in shopping centres, in train stations. I mean, obviously I could carry on and on, but I think my point really is that it's really welcomed, more often than not in my experience, that if you have an idea, to really shout it, give it to the management. They'll probably take you up on it, and I don't mean that necessarily as just a member. You could be a guest of an orchestra as well. You could be a guest on tour, for example, and say, I'd love to write a blog. I'm sure the management would be delighted. Anything that gives a kind of further connection between the orchestra and its audience is so valuable, and that comes with so much power and kind of conviction and importance if it comes from the people working within the orchestra themselves. So from the playing perspective, and I'm going to focus here on chamber orchestras because that's mainly what I've done, playing in a section of people, I think orchestras play in so many different ways. You can go into one section and one orchestra and it can feel really, really kind of vital in its playing, really on the front of the beat, really kind of dynamic and with almost kind of not aggressive but kind of really full-on play. And you could go and play perhaps the same piece even with the same conductor in another orchestra and it feel completely different. It could feel really on the back of the beat, very, perhaps more refined in its style. And of course neither is right or wrong, they're just different. And I suppose the first thing to get across is that it's so important to be aware of that and to kind of adapt your own style of playing accordingly and think, oh gosh, this orchestra are really assertive with where they're playing. I'm going to have to just put my neck on the line and play right now. Whereas in the refined orchestra, you might think, I'm just going to listen to the sound here and go with what's happening and play perhaps in a more gentle, refined style. But generally speaking, I think it's so important to blend, which is connected with that, of course. So your blend of sound, and I think particularly as a first violinist, that may be important from a specific point of view. I think perhaps one main thing that I've gleaned is that trying to get that kind of responsive and positivity in your playing, along with being aware and blending, is the challenge. And I think a lot of that comes down to the phrasing. Listening to the conductor and watching the leader, it's amazing how much phrasing you can do without it being too much, how much coming away from a gesture, for example, you can do without it fizzling away to nothing, for example. And I think that's how you can give the power when you would like to, particularly with the bow, perhaps you can really you can really go for the gesture. As long as you come away, and as long as you're not the one player in the section holding on to the sound, then that's absolutely fine, and it can be quite liberating to experience music in that way. So the one thing I'd say is to blend your sound, and to blend it by paying particular attention to the gesture and phrasing of a conductor and of the leader of the section. Having largely so far talked about the role of a chamber violinist or chamber musician in a chamber orchestra or indeed symphony orchestra, I'd now like to talk about smaller groups, and particularly with my experience playing as leader of a quartet, which I did for 9 years with the Edinburgh Quartet up in Scotland. And instead really of focusing on the role of playing, which I think varies considerably from group to group depending on that group's style of playing, I'd like to talk more about the other side of it, the business side, if you like, the visionary side of being in a string quartet, just to highlight how important that is. It's so crucial, and I think now more crucial than ever, to be looking to the future and thinking, what is the role, what's important for this group going forward, what can it give? I think probably this crisis could be a real opportunity for smaller groups. It seems that the world is going to get so much more localised, so much more is going to be done at home and around the home and around your hometown. And actually with the Edinburgh Quartet that was particularly the case. It was really sort of Scotland string quartet for us, and that was, you know, we did a huge number of concerts in Scotland, and actually building up that fan base, if you like, that audience, that kind of connection with your local community is really, really important. And I can see that as a way forward now is really crucial. But that's just what I think. And I think really my main point to get across is that if you're going to play in a group like that, it's so critical to have a vision of where you're going, what makes your quartet tick, what makes your quartet so special, so different from any other quartet that's out there. Why are a group going to book you? Why is an audience going to warm to you? Why would an audience want to connect with you? And but also obviously to marry that with your skills, with your passions of music, of where you would like to, what you would like to play and where you'd like to play it. Probably all fairly obvious when you say it, but actually so critical to actually do it. And with my experience with the quartet, quite often we were faced with fundraising forms and applications to fill in, and with those would come a lot of kind of what is, you could see as red tape or bureaucracy of coming up with grand sounding 3-year, 5-year, even 10-year plans of where the quartet was headed. But these are so valuable actually, and actually writing down where you'd like the quartet to be in a year's time, in 3 years' time, 5 years' time, and even a 10-year one, however sketchy that might be, is so valuable, and I really urge you to do that. And as playing in a quartet is concerned, as I have done throughout this video, I can only urge you to not just restrict yourself to the quartet playing, but to I think it's so important to do other things alongside it. So, for example, in Scotland, I played in a Scottish ensemble, a wonderful string group, small string chamber group. And from there, I felt like I gained so much inspiration in different ideas, in different ways of music making, different ways of playing and thinking about music. And it was so helpful, I think, to then bring that back to the quartet. And with all four players doing a variety of different things like that, of course, the quartet is more and more enriched in its ideas and its sound and its direction of what it could be doing. So, moving on from small groups playing chamber music, like string quartets, to much larger ones, and large chamber ensembles, which would be playing things like reductions of Mahler symphonies by Schoenberg, did lots of them. Ian Farrington, for example, has made some wonderful arrangements of Mahler and Strauss and even Sibelius. I've had the pleasure and privilege of directing a few of these ventures, and it's been an incredible learning curve for me, really enriching as a musician. It's felt really, really rewarding, and playing in them is exhilarating. And if you get the chance to play in something such as this, then please do grab it with both hands. It's just a fantastic thing to do. And I think one of the main challenges as a director, but also just as a member of one of these groups, is kind of trying to hang on to the idea of it being a chamber ensemble, playing symphonic pieces of music that need, to be negotiated. They're often incredibly long, incredibly large scale in terms of their musical direction and intention. And but trying to do that with a large group of people, but maintaining a sort of freedom and individuality that you would expect playing chamber music is a real challenge. And I think really what I've learned a great deal from is by watching conductors in my various other roles I've talked about, and seeing how they negotiate these big pieces. And of course, great conductors will take a few bars apart and really examine detail in pieces of music. But more often than not, I've noticed that conductors are concerned with that idea of the large shape, the general tempo of a piece will sort of seem so obvious at the time, and yet is so crucial. I remember playing all the Beethoven symphonies with Charles McHarris at the Edinburgh Festival with the Scottish Chamber Orchestra many years ago now, but it was such an extraordinarily rewarding experience. It really was. He had very limited rehearsal time because we were doing all of them, but the orchestra played under him countless times before, knew how he would like them to be played, really. But the way that he spent those rehearsals was really interesting, because he didn't spend them kind of going over all the nuts and bolts and saying, oh, this bit's not together, or this bit needs a bit more such and such. It was so much to do with just getting the right tempo, the right feel of phrasing and shape, and the right feel to each of the movements, so that, a scherzo felt like it had a real drive to it, for example, or that the slow movement didn't get too stodgy in the middle, or had a kind of rasping sound in a finale that was kind of his main thing, if you like, for each movement and each symphony, that made it come alive. And it's that kind of thriftiness in musical intention, if you like, that I think you can really use when you're playing in a big piece of chamber music. So what is it? What's the main thing, the main quality of the movement of the piece of music that's going to keep everybody moving along in the same intention, the same idea? What is it? Is it a tempo thing? Is it a direction thing? Is it a sense of phrasing to the end of the exposition, of the feeling of a journey together? And having some very, very general ideas of direction, phrasing and approach, and then really letting the chamber music happen within that, so that there's still plenty of scope for individuals to feel and play the way that they feel within that journey. So there's a kind of unified approach to the bigger picture, but within that you still have that quality of chamber music, which of course is what it's all about. You don't want to just replicate a big symphony for a small number of players. That would just be pointless. But get it right, and it's a really exhilarating mix of wonderful pieces of music, powerful pieces of music, with an extra intensity and intimacy with a small group of players. So through this little video, I hope I've encouraged you all to be really versatile as chamber musicians, to think outside the box and try all sorts of roles and all sorts of groups of shapes and sizes out. I found that it's been an incredibly rewarding experience to experience playing in all sorts of different scenarios and with different groups and in different roles, and I just urge you to do the same. I hope that some of my thoughts and experiences along the way are helpful to you in the future, and that perhaps even in a few years' time you might find yourself in one of the roles that I've been talking about, and maybe just at the back of your mind you might think, what was that guy saying again? And it might be helpful. It would be wonderful if we have a chance to chat more about this, maybe online, and perhaps even one day, who knows, in person. But until then, thanks for watching, and all the very best. Thank you. Bye.